The Vote or Die campaign is back, just in time for the 2020 election.
Us weaponizing our vote and weaponizing our dollar is a nightmare.
Diddy kicked off the campaign with a town hall called State of Emergency, Election Day in Black America. So what's new with this relaunch? We wanted to find out too. So we spoke to Revolt TV's Chief Operating Officer, Detavio Samuels, for answers. We're in a strange time right now. We've talked a lot about how this election is reshaping our alliances. People who normally vote Republican are now voting for Joe Biden. And Ice Cube is drawing a lot of criticism for reaching out to both parties. But even Killer Mike has said, you know, this agenda, this Black agenda, it's bigger than parties.
We simply say, how do we take the good of what you have, the good of what you have, the good of what you have and you have, how do we shape it into a 10-point agenda to present to every local, state, and national politician? If you cannot meet points on our agenda, we simply can't support you.
This is about ideas. What's your take?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that we have in this country for so long given our loyalty to people who have not tried to earn it. And so I am very happy to see this movement and this moment and see us change, where we are saying that it is the Black agenda that rides first and foremost, that we are going to partner with anybody who is going to help us push that agenda forward. That is the way that it should always be. That's the way that politics and government and elections should always work. Somehow in America, I think we lost sight of that, specifically with Black America, and it's very exciting to see us getting that energy back.
And you said the predominant influence of hip hop across every facet of global culture is undeniable, and Revolt has the momentum and the necessary ingredients to harness that power and drive it forward as no one else can. Can you talk to me about what that means, about using hip hop as a medium to harness the power and affect change in society and in government?
Sure. I think at Revolt, we believe we have all of the ingredients to move the needle. So first, if you start with hip hop culture.
When they say they doing all this and all that, I'm in the trenches, relax.
Hip hop is the #1 music across the globe, period. Hip hop is driving global culture. It is driving US culture. So we are fully aligned and tapped into the spirit and the ethos that is hip hop. We also are founded and owned by Sean Diddy Combs, who I believe is one of the greatest influencers of all time. And then lastly, we are focused on Gen Y and Gen Z, young people. And young people have always been known for shaking up change and creating new worlds and designing new worlds. And so for us, we have all of the ingredients. And then you step into a world where our audience is being underserved by so many people in this moment, whether it's the media, political, government, business. And so you take a company like Revolt, who brings them hip hop, who brings them Diddy, who brings them all of the voices and the power of hip hop, and it is leading them in a battle for a fight for social justice, a fight for global change, a fight for this election to make sure their voices are truly heard. And so we believe we have all of the ingredients. The momentum has been really amazing as of this summer. And so really feel like we are getting to play a real role and an active catalyst in this fight and in this revolution.
And speaking of Gen Z, Vote or Die released a study on Gen Z voters. You know, these are people in their 20s. And the research shows that 1 out of every 4 people in this demographic are voting. So my question is, why aren't these people voting, and how can Revolt connect and engage with them?
Yeah, every election you see that only about 50% of the youth show up. And I think what's not really been done is an understanding of why. So people will try to tap in and create that change, but don't have a real root cause understanding of why that's happening. And so we set out this year to do a study to really understand this generation, to see the world through their eyes and to give them voice. And what we uncovered was really surprising, in that 28% of them already right now are saying that they have no plan of voting. And what we see is probably one of the most critical elections of all of our lifetimes. But they are so disengaged because of the options, because of the lack of change that they've seen through politics over time. And so 28% of them just off GP are saying we're not going to show up. Then you lose another 22% of them due to high barriers, due to, you know, there's definitely a thing around folks who are not legally allowed to vote. And so So at most, when you wrap it up, you have 50% of them who are trying to show up. And so that's why we created Vote or Die, because if you can only get 50% as your max potential, our job is to figure out to get how all 50% of them to show up to the polls.
Now, speaking of launching Vote or Die, we know that Diddy launched Vote or Die in 2004. That's back when I think it was John Kerry and George Bush were running for president. So the goal at the time, which I'm sure is still the goal, was to produce voter turnout. And so you guys have relaunched again. So talk to me about what is different this time.
Sure. So again, every election year, folks are trying to figure out how you get these youth to show out, because they usually show up in pretty low numbers. In 2004, Vote or Die was around making voting cool. But as with all things, our fearless leader, Sean Combs, he was ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time naming a brand called Revolt in 2013 to be prepared for this moment in 2020. He was ahead of his time thinking about this idea of Vote or Die in 2004. And when we walked into this moment and we were trying to figure out how do we signal both the sense of urgency that is required in this moment, but also that their survival is literally on the line.
I gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this country. I served this country.
The people who they choose to put in office will make decisions around gun control, abortion rights, LGBTQ, police brutality, systemic racism. So we were looking for something that could signal this notion that it was urgent and their survival was on the line. And Vote or Die was the best name, period, point blank, possible.
So when you think about this anger and this rage, because there's a way to get answers. Every single last one of you gotta be registered to vote. Every single last one of you.
So I would say that I would describe the difference as in 2004 was about being cool, and 2020 is about signaling a sense of urgency and making sure that they understand that their voices need to be heard, not just at the presidential level, but at the DA level, the sheriff level, the mayoral layer, all of those places where they're making decisions that can impact the lives of them and their communities.
Absolutely. The importance of local elections. I've been trying to drill that in.
Yes.
That's where the change really starts. We have to engage civically every 2 years. That's just driving that point home. And lastly, LeBron wore a Vote or Die shirt a couple of weeks ago. He has an amazing platform. Who else are you guys enlisting? And is there any room for, or is there any social media platforms going on where regular folks can engage and participate?
Absolutely. So I'm going to keep a little bit of a hush hush on all of the celebrity gifting that just went out the door, but please know that a large group of celebrities have been sent these t-shirts, and we hope to see them represent them and encourage their young folks to come out and turn out and vote. In terms of regular folks, we're going to be highlighting them as well as on our platform. If you go to revolt.tv, you can actually buy your own Vote or Die t-shirt. Once we re-release them, the energy and the excitement and the nostalgia that's attached to Vote or Die really took off. And so instead of just giving it to the celebs and the influencers, we wanted to make sure that the people who we need to get out and vote have them on. So please go to revolt.tv. We would love to see anybody during election season while you're in that line, letting folks know that you are here, letting your voice be heard, because you understand that in 2020, it's Vote or Die.
The upcoming election is one that is vital to our democracy, critical to ensuring fairness and equality for all. Culture Conversations has assembled a panel of political experts, people with knowledge and expertise in election systems, voting rights, constitutional law, and more, for a closer look at the issues. Over the next several weeks, they will provide background, insight, and context, all in the hopes that it helps to inform you of your choice when you confront the ballot. I want to talk to you about the swing states, because they're ultimately going to play a big role in this upcoming election. For those who don't know, what are the swing states and why do they matter so much?
So swing states matter precisely because these are the battleground states for presidential candidates. In the Electoral College, the way it works is that your state has, the number of representatives, congressional delegates that you have, and along with the number of senators. So it's, say 15 plus 2. If you're in California, it's 53 plus 2. So we have 55 Electoral College votes. the way that this works is that if the candidate who wins the state, the presidential candidate who wins the state, effectively gets all of those electoral college votes, and they need 270 to win. So what happens with these toss-up states, these swing states, which can include Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin and Michigan, can include Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina, what we see is that, the candidates are much more likely to spend time in those states because they're hoping to win the general election. And to win the general election, you have to win the electoral college. So with these swing states, what you'll find is that, these are the states where perhaps the most money is spent. Florida and Pennsylvania, for instance, have the highest number of electoral college voters, but the winners take the spoils. So this is not about the popular vote. This is about the electoral college, where whoever wins Florida, no matter how close it is, wins the vote, gets all of those electoral college votes to get themselves to 270.
For those who don't know, can you explain how the electoral college works?
Sure. And I think, in order to understand the electoral college, I think we need to put it in historical context. So there was an initial proposal to have the president elected through popular vote. James Madison, who was a Virginian, argued against that. And he argued, along with others from the South, that rather than a popular vote, they needed a more indirect way to elect the president. Their chief concern was that in the northern states, the number of whites who were free and could vote was much larger than in the South. I mean, the South had fairly substantial slave populations in some states. In fact, South Carolina had more slaves than actual freed white men that were in the state. So they really worried about how this would occur, and they thought that they would be at a disadvantage. So the compromise that was created was the creation of the Electoral College, which in many ways is a very undemocratic institution, right? Because it takes election of the president away from the people and actually puts it in the hands of electors.
So I want to take it back to the last election. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Donald Trump took the Electoral College.
Some people say if Hillary Clinton would have gone to Pennsylvania and Ohio, she would have won with enough popular votes that the Electoral College would not have been triggered. And therefore, she would be president of the United States. So the swing states are the states in which we have voters who could go either majority Republican or majority Democrat. And these are states that at one point were on the edge of being just known for one party, that have now been in question, and that's why they're called swing states. And Georgia may end up being one of those states because it has become more and more Democratic as people from the north have moved back down south. And so you never know where Georgia lies.
With the 2020 election coming up, could we see the same sort of scenario play out with maybe Joe Biden winning the popular vote and Donald Trump winning the Electoral College again?
I mean, one of the sort of challenges with the college right now is that because the country is so sharply divided between red states and blue states, we're only talking about a small number of states that are actually battleground states. During the 2016 election, only about 11 states were really competitive states. Most of the other states were pretty much people knew which direction they were going to go. And so a lot of the money and the effort went into those states. But then on the other hand, the problem is that a state like Michigan, for example, if you see just a slight decline like what occurred among African-American voters, it tips the state. And all you need is one vote over the majority and you win the state and you win all of the electors because it's a winner-take-all system.
So, there's a lot of chatter right now about the Electoral College and maybe the negative impact that it has on communities of color. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and why folks may feel like that?
What we see with the Electoral College is that small states, small rural states, have a disproportionate advantage over larger states that tend to have larger populations of communities of color. So that includes California, that includes New York. What ends up happening in essence is that that smaller states have an outsized influence over electoral outcomes than do larger states. And in so doing, that's, anti-democratic at its core, but it disproportionately has a negative impact on the electoral outcome for the presidency, and consequently a negative impact for communities of color, particularly the Black and Latinx individuals.
I feel like that's why many people argue that we need to get rid of the Electoral College. What would it take to make that happen?
I would love to see that happen. I mean, it would certainly take a constitutional amendment, but I think that the Constitution, when it was created, certainly, was flawed in various respects. Whether we're talking about, the 3/5 provision regarding slavery, whether we're talking about the fact that women couldn't vote, whether we're talking about the fact that women weren't even involved in the creation of the Constitution. So there are many ways in which the Constitution has been amended, and many more ways in which it should be amended. And I think the Electoral College gets in the way of a popular vote. It places too much emphasis on certain toss-up states and not enough emphasis on getting votes out across the country.
And that will do it for us. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and keep the conversation going. Let us know how we're doing. Shoot us an email. We're at cultureconversations@voxtv.com.